forest had been dying for 7 days. Elaine felt it in the way the trees no longer sang, in the way the wind carried ash instead of pollen, in the way the light that filtered through the canopy had turned the color of old blood. She stood at the edge of the fountain of youth, her hands pressed against the ancient stone that had contained its waters for 700 years, and knew with absolute certainty that something terrible was coming. Ban found her there as the 8th day dawned. He moved through the dying forest without sound, his footsteps leaving no trace on ground that had begun to crack and split like old leather. When he reached her, he didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. They had known this moment would come since the first tree fell, since the first star went dark in the sky above them, since reality itself began to fracture at the edges. "It's getting worse," Elaine said. Her voice carried the weight of centuries, though her form remained small and fragile in the morning light. "I can feel them. They're trying to break through." Ban's hand found her shoulder. His touch was warm against her skin, solid in a world that had begun to feel increasingly unreal. He had never been good with words, had never known how to articulate the things that moved in his chest when he looked at her. But his presence said what his voice could not. The first crack appeared at noon. It split the air like breaking glass, a sound that made Elaine's breath catch and Ban's hand move instinctively to the 3-section staff he no longer carried. The rift hung in the space above the fountain, a tear in reality that bled colors that had no names. Through it, they could see something that was not sky, not space, not anything that belonged to the world they knew. "Ban." Elaine's voice had gone quiet. "If it takes me, don't follow." He looked at her then, and his magenta eyes held an expression she had seen only once before, on the day the demon had come and everything had burned. It was the look of a man who had already made his choice, who had decided long ago that there were some lines he would cross without hesitation. "Like hell," he said. The fountain's water began to rise. It moved against gravity, against nature, pulled upward by forces that cared nothing for the laws that governed mortal things. The life essence contained within, accumulated over millennia, began to resonate with the rift above. Elaine reached for Ban's hand as the first tendrils of pure energy started to leak from the stone basin. She had been the fountain's guardian for 7 centuries. She knew its power, understood the weight of immortality it could grant, comprehended the cosmic significance of what it represented. But she had never imagined it could be weaponized, could be turned into a beacon that would tear holes between worlds. The explosion came without warning. One moment the fountain stood as it had for thousands of years. The next, it shattered. Stone and water and essence erupted in a column of light that punched through the canopy, through the clouds, through the boundaries of reality itself. The shockwave flattened what remained of the forest in a perfect circle, turning ancient trees to splinters in an instant. Ban felt himself lifted, thrown backward by force that should have pulverized every bone in his body. But the immortality he had gained from the fountain's waters kept him whole even as the world came apart around him. He hit the ground hard enough to create a crater, rolled, came up reaching for Elaine, even as his vision swam with stars. She was floating. The life essence had wrapped around her like chains, lifting her toward the rift that had grown massive in the seconds since the explosion. Her fairy nature, her connection to the forest's spiritual energy, made her a perfect conduit for the forces bleeding through from the other side. She struggled against the pull, but it was like fighting the tide. Ban didn't think. Thinking was for people who had something to lose. He pushed off the ground with all the strength his unnatural body could muster, launched himself upward through air thick with debris and energy. His hand closed around Elaine's wrist just as she reached the edge of the rift. "Let go," she said. Her eyes were wide, terrified not of what was pulling her, but of what he was about to do. "Ban, please, let go." He pulled her close, instead wrapped his arms around her small frame and let momentum carry them both into the tear between worlds. The transition was immediate and absolute. One moment they existed in the dying forest of Britannia, surrounded by the familiar physics of their reality. The next, they were somewhere else. Somewhere that defied every rule Ban's mind tried to impose upon it. The warp was not a place. It was the absence of place, the negation of space, the cosmic joke played on creatures who thought in terms of here and there. Colors that should not exist bled into each other in patterns that hurt to perceive. Sounds came from directions that did not correspond to any geometry Ban understood. And everywhere pressing against his consciousness like a physical weight was the presence of things that watched with hunger older than stars. Elaine screamed. Not in pain, but in recognition. Her fairy nature, so attuned to spiritual energies, made her exquisitely sensitive to the warp's touch. She could feel the demons circling, could sense the malevolent intelligence that pervaded every impossible inch of this non-space. Ban held her tighter, tried to shield her with his body, even though he knew it was useless here. The first demon came from below, or above, or beside. Direction lost all meaning in the warp. It was made of teeth and hunger and the scream of dying things, and when its claws raked across Ban's back, they cut through immortal flesh like it was paper. Pain exploded through him. Real pain, the kind he had not felt since before the fountain. His regeneration kicked in immediately, but it was slower here, struggling against the warp's unnatural laws. The demon circled back for another pass, and this time Ban was ready. His fist connected with something that might have been a face, and he felt bones that should not exist crack under the impact. The demon dissolved into screaming light. But there were others. There were always others. They came in waves, drawn by the beacon of life, essence that still clung to Elaine, attracted by the presence of souls untainted by chaos. Ban fought with the desperation of a man who had already lost everything once and refused to let it happen again. He had no weapon, no technique beyond raw determination and the strength that immortality had granted him. Each demon he destroyed reformed seconds later. Each wound he took healed fractionally slower than the last. Time meant nothing here. They might have fought for seconds or centuries. Ban's consciousness began to fragment under the assault, his sense of self eroding as the warp pressed against his mind. But through it all, he kept his arms around Elaine, kept his body between her and the things that wanted to consume her essence. Then, cutting through the chaos like a blade through fog, came something else. Something disciplined, something human. The psychic resonance preceded their arrival by microseconds. Ban felt it as a pressure change, a sudden ordering of the warp's chaotic energies. Then reality tore again, and through the new rift came warriors in silver armor, marked with symbols that blazed with their own light. Grey Knights. Ban had no way of knowing what they were, no context for understanding the significance of their presence. But he recognized immediately what they represented, a threat more focused and deadly than any demon. The lead warrior raised a weapon that crackled with barely contained power. His helmet's optics locked onto Elaine, and through the psychic channels that connected all Grey Knights came a single word that carried the weight of absolute conviction. Purge. Ban felt Elaine's small form tense in his arms. Felt her understand with the clarity that only the truly doomed possess exactly what these warriors intended. The demons scattered, driven back by the Grey Knight's sanctified presence. But the reprieve was temporary, and the new threat was far worse. The warrior's finger tightened on the trigger. Ban moved, throwing himself and Elaine sideways through the warp's impossible geometry. The shot that would have annihilated them both carved a line of pure destruction through the space they had occupied, and the psychic backlash sent ripples through the Imperium that would be felt across half a sector. Then the warp itself seemed to lurch, to twist, to reject their presence with sudden violence. Ban felt reality reassert itself with the force of a hammer blow. He and Elaine were falling, tumbling out of the Imperium and back into real space. The Grey Knight's transport vanished into the distance, unable or unwilling to follow. They fell through void, through atmosphere, through clouds that parted around them like water. Below, a world materialized. Dead metallic wrong in ways that Ban's instincts screamed warnings about. He wrapped himself around Elaine, tried to position his body to take the impact. The ground came up fast. Ban hit hard enough to crack stone to create a crater that spider-webbed outward for 20 meters. His bones shattered. His organs ruptured. His immortal flesh struggled to keep him alive through damage that would have killed any normal being a dozen times over. But he was healing. Slowly, painfully, but healing. He uncurled himself from around Elaine, checked her for injuries with hands that shook. She was unconscious, but breathing, her fairy light dimmed but not extinguished. Ban looked up at the sky at stars that seemed too bright and too cold. Around them, the dead world began to wake. He heard the sound of metal grinding against metal, felt vibrations through the ground that spoke of vast machinery coming online beneath them. And in the distance, green lights began to flicker to life. Cold, ancient, hungry in a way completely different from the demons they had fled. Ban pulled Elaine close and waited for whatever came next. His immortality had failed him in the warp, had proven insufficient against forces beyond mortal comprehension. But he was still here, still breathing, still capable of fighting. That would have to be enough. The tomb world's silence was absolute. Ban lay in the crater for 3 minutes before his ribs finished knitting back together. Each breath came with the taste of copper and the sensation of bones grinding against tissue that hadn't quite healed. His regeneration was working, but wrong. Slower. Like his body had forgotten some fundamental truth about itself during those timeless moments in the warp. Elaine stirred in his arms. Her eyes opened unfocused, the pupils dilated in a way that suggested shock rather than injury. When she tried to speak, only a small sound emerged, something between a gasp and a sob. "Don't," Ban said. His voice came out rougher than intended. "Save your strength." She nodded against his chest. He felt her heartbeat too fast, felt the way her fairy essence flickered like a candle in wind. The warp had marked her. He didn't need mystical sight to understand that. Whatever she had touched in that place between realities, it had touched her back. The green lights in the distance had multiplied. They moved with mechanical precision, converging on their location from multiple vectors. Ban forced himself to stand his legs, protesting the movement. The crater around them was glass smooth where the impact had superheated stone. Beyond it, the landscape stretched in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Pyramids and obelisks rose from metallic sand, each one positioned with mathematical perfection. This was not a natural world. Had never been natural. The realization settled in Ban's gut like lead. He needed to move, needed to find shelter before whatever owned those lights reached them. But when he tried to take a step, his left leg buckled. The impact damage had been more severe than he thought. He gritted his teeth, pulled Elaine tighter against him, and forced his body to obey. The sound came from everywhere at once. A single tone impossibly pure that resonated through the dead world's atmosphere like a tuning fork struck against reality. Ban's teeth ached with it. Elaine whimpered, pressed her hands over her ears. Then the sky tore open, not like the warp rift. This was cleaner, more surgical. A perfect circle of reality peeled back to reveal the howling chaos beyond. Through it came the Grey Knight's ship, a vessel of such brutal functionality that Ban understood immediately it had been designed for one purpose: killing things that should not exist. The teleportation strike came 3 seconds later. No warning, no build-up. One moment the space between Ban and the approaching green lights was empty. The next 5 warriors in silver armor stood in perfect formation, their weapons already tracking targets. Justikar Dragor's helmet optics fixed on Elaine with the intensity of a predator identifying prey. His power sword ignited, wreathed in flames that burned without heat, without light, without anything resembling normal combustion. The psychic resonance it generated made Ban's skin crawl. "Warp touched," Dragor said. His voice carried through external speakers with the weight of absolute conviction. "The contamination is terminal. The Emperor's mercy is swift." Ban moved before the sentence finished. His hand shot out, grabbed a fistful of Dragor's ornate armor, and yanked. The Grey Knight, despite weighing easily 3 times what any human should, stumbled forward. Ban's other hand came up in a strike that would have caved in a normal man's skull. It connected with Dragor's helmet, with a sound like a bell being struck. The Grey Knight's head snapped to the side. For a moment, absolute silence fell across the dead world. Then Dragor turned back, and Ban saw the fury radiating from him, like heat from a forge. "Impediment," the Justicar said. His blade came around in an arc that should have been impossible for something so massive. Ban threw himself backward, felt the psychically charged edge pass within centimeters of his throat. The air where it passed ignited, burned, died. The other Grey Knights opened fire. Stormbolter rounds, each one blessed and sanctified, carved through the space Ban had occupied. He was already moving, years of fighting experience telling him where to be before the triggers were pulled. But there were 5 of them, and they fired with the coordinated precision of warriors who had trained together for decades. One round caught him in the shoulder. The impact spun him, sent him crashing to the ground. The blessed ammunition exploded inside his flesh, tore through muscle and bone with prejudice that went beyond physical damage. Ban felt something fundamental in him recoil from the psychic taint the rounds carried. He rolled, came up running. Elaine clutched against his chest. His shoulder was already healing, but slower still. Each regeneration seemed to take longer than the last. The immortality the fountain had granted was failing piece by piece, consumed by forces that cared nothing for the magic of his old world. Dragor pursued with mechanical efficiency. His blade carved through the air in patterns that Ban's combat instincts recognized as perfect. No wasted movement, no openings. Just the steady advance of someone who had killed things far more dangerous than one stubborn immortal. "Your resistance is meaningless," Dragor said. He punctuated each word with a strike that forced Ban to give ground. "The entity you protect will serve as a beacon for demonic incursion. It must be cleansed." "She has a name," Ban said. He ducked under a horizontal slash, felt the blessed flame singe the hair on his head. His foot shot out, caught Dragor behind the knee. The Grey Knight didn't fall, but he shifted, adjusted, and for a fraction of a second, his perfect guard wavered. Ban's hand closed around the pommel of the power sword. He yanked, pulled with strength that shouldn't exist in a body his size. The sword came free from Dragor's grip, and Ban threw it. Not at the Grey Knights. At the ground 20 meters distant, where it embedded itself to the hilt in metallic stone. Dragor paused. Through his helmet, Ban felt the weight of the warrior's consideration. Then the Justicar raised one hand, and the power sword flew back to his grip, as if recalled by invisible strings. "Impressive," Dragor said, "but ultimately futile." The Stormbolter fire intensified. Ban ran his body, moving on instinct alone. Each step sent jolts of pain through limbs that hadn't finished healing from the last injury. Each breath tasted of blood. But he kept moving, kept putting distance between Elaine and the warriors who would kill her out of principle. Then the green lights arrived. They rose from the sand like emerging serpents. Constructs of living metal, each one bearing weapons that predated human civilization by millions of years. Their optics swept across the battlefield with emotionless calculation, targeting algorithms processing threats with cold efficiency. The Grey Knights pivoted immediately. Whatever their mission regarding Elaine the Necrons represented a more immediate concern. Dragor's blade swept through the first warrior's torso, severing it in a shower of sparks and metallic fragments. But the pieces began reassembling, even as they fell necrodermis, flowing back together with disturbing fluidity. Ban didn't wait to see how the battle resolved. He ran using the chaos as cover. Behind him, the sound of war filled the dead world. Bolter fire and Gauss weaponry blessed blades and molecular disassembly. The two forces crashed together with the violence of opposing philosophies made manifest. The ground beneath Ban's feet began to shake. Ahead, a fissure opened, revealing depths that glowed with that same sickly green illumination. He changed direction, but more cracks appeared, spreading like a web. The tomb world was waking, and it was angry. Something massive moved in the depths. Ban caught a glimpse of it through the widening fissures. A construct larger than any building he had ever seen, all angles and impossible geometry. Its presence pressed against his mind made his thoughts feel sluggish and thick. Elaine's hand tightened on his shirt. "Ban," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, barely audible over the sounds of battle. "I can't feel my legs." He looked down. The fairy light that normally surrounded her had dimmed to almost nothing. Her skin had taken on a translucent quality, as if she were slowly fading from reality itself. The warp's touch was killing her bit by bit. "Stay with me," Ban said. It wasn't a request. The sound of teleportation resonated behind them. Ban turned to see Dragor rematerializing, his armor scorched and damaged. But the warrior himself, seemingly untouched by exhaustion. The Justicar raised his storm bolter, the weapon's barrels still glowing from sustained fire. "Final warning," Dragor said. "Surrender the warp-touched entity. This is mercy." Ban's response was to run harder, to push his failing body beyond its limits one more time. The crater's edge rushed toward him, and beyond it, nothing but darkness. He jumped. The fall seemed to last forever. Wind screamed past them, and Ban felt Elaine's grip weaken, felt her essence scatter like smoke. But he held on, wrapped his body around her, refused to let the void claim what he had fought so hard to protect. They hit something solid. Not ground. Something else. Something that gave slightly under the impact, then contracted around them like a closing fist. Ban had a moment to register the sensation of being trapped before consciousness left him entirely. When darkness took him, his last thought was that at least they were still together. Consciousness returned in fragments. Ban became aware first of cold. Not the cold of winter or deep water, but something more fundamental. The absence of heat, the negation of warmth, a chill that went beyond physical sensation and touched something deeper. His eyes opened to darkness so complete it might have been solid. Then light bloomed, green and pitiless. It illuminated a chamber carved from metal that seemed to drink in the illumination rather than reflect it. The walls were covered in hieroglyphs that hurt to look at, directly symbols that suggested meanings too vast for human comprehension. And everywhere the hum of machinery that had been running since before humanity learned to make fire. Ban tried to move and found himself bound. Not with chains or rope, but with beams of emerald energy that pinned his arms and legs to a vertical surface. He pulled against them, felt his muscles strain, felt the beginnings of regeneration where the energy seared his skin. The bonds held. Elaine was 10 meters away, suspended in a column of light that seemed less like restraint and more like preservation. Her eyes were closed, her small form motionless. But Ban could see her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Still alive. For now, the sound of footsteps came from everywhere and nowhere. A measured tread that echoed through the chamber with mechanical precision. Then from the shadows beyond the green light, it emerged. The Necron stood 3 meters tall, its skeletal frame wrought from living metal that flowed and shifted with each movement. Its chest bore sigils that Ban didn't recognize, but somehow understood, spoke of authority, of rank, of power that transcended mere physical might. In one hand, it carried a staff topped with a crystal that pulsed in rhythm with some unknowable heartbeat. When it spoke, its voice was a choir of whispers, each one slightly out of sync with the others. The effect was profoundly unsettling, as if multiple consciousnesses occupied the same metallic shell. "Awake, Mantike," it said. The word carried weight that went beyond sound. "Good. Unconscious subjects yield inferior data." Ban said nothing. He watched the construct approach, noted the way its joints articulated with impossible smoothness, cataloged the various weapons built into its frame. His mind, trained by years of combat, automatically searched for weaknesses even as his body remained trapped. The Necron stopped before Elaine's containment field. Its skull-like head tilted with mechanical precision as it studied her suspended form. One skeletal hand reached out, passed through the light without apparent effect, and touched her cheek with fingers that should have been cold metal, but somehow felt colder still. "Fascinating," it whispered. "A spiritual entity, a being of pure anima bound to physical form through mechanisms we have not encountered in 60 million years of catalog. The deterioration is advanced. Days, perhaps, no more." Something in Ban's chest went tight. Let her go. The Necron's head swiveled to face him. Its optical sensors glowing with that same green fire fixed on Ban with the intensity of a dissecting gaze. For a long moment, it simply stared. Then its jaw opened in what might have been a smile, if the gesture held any warmth at all. "Possessive," it observed. "Emotional attachment to the failing entity. This creates leverage. I am designated Triarch Praetorian. I speak with the authority of the Silent King. You will comply with my directives, or the entity's remaining time will be measured in hours rather than days." Ban pulled against his restraints hard enough that the energy beams flickered. His skin burned where they held him, but pain was familiar. Pain was manageable. The Praetorian's threat was not. "What do you want?" The Necron moved with liquid grace, its staff striking the metal floor with a sound like a death knell. "Your species displays remarkable persistence. This quality, combined with your evident regenerative capabilities, makes you useful. You will serve as retrieval mechanism for materials we require. And if I refuse?" The Praetorian gestured with one hand. The containment field around Elaine flickered, and Ban saw her form waver, saw the fairy light dim further. When the field stabilized, Elaine's eyes opened briefly. They found his across the distance, and in them he saw terror mixed with resignation. "Refusal is not available," the Praetorian said. "The entity's cellular cohesion is maintained by technology you cannot comprehend. Discontinue cooperation, and discontinuation of maintenance follows. The timeline is simple." Ban forced his breathing to steady, forced his mind to work through the rage that threatened to consume rational thought. He had fought demons, had survived. The warp had endured injuries that should have killed him 100 times over. But this was different. This was powerlessness of a more insidious kind. "What kind of materials?" The Praetorian's optical sensors brightened. "Acceptable. First retrieval target Drukari holding coordinates provided. Objective: eliminate inhabitants, retrieve stasis pods containing uncontaminated genetic samples. Secondary targets will be designated upon successful completion of primary objective." The energy restraints released. Ban dropped to the floor, caught himself. Rose slowly. Every instinct screamed at him to attack the Necron standing before him. But one glance at Elaine, suspended and dying in her cage of light, killed that impulse before it could become action. "How long?" he asked. Clarify query. "How long does she have without your technology?" The Praetorian tilted its head. Estimation based on current deterioration rate, 43 hours. With biostasis intervention, indefinite suspension possible. Choose carefully, implement. Time allocation for first mission 6 days. Failure to return within designated period results in automatic deactivation of preservation systems. 6 days. Ban looked at Elaine one more time, saw the faint rise and fall of her chest, saw the way her light had dimmed to almost nothing. Then he turned back to the Praetorian and nodded once. "Show me where to go." The Necron led him through corridors that defied spatial logic. They descended for what felt like hours, but might have been minutes, passing through chambers filled with machinery that hummed with patient malevolence. Other Necrons moved through the complex with mechanical purpose, their forms varying wildly in size and configuration. Some were small, barely larger than humans. Others towered so high their heads disappeared into shadows. The green light couldn't penetrate. They emerged into a chamber that contained what Ban could only describe as a map. It hung in the air, a three-dimensional representation of space rendered in threads of light. The Praetorian gestured, and a section brightened. "Drukhari vessel," it explained. "Current position, orbital approach trajectory. Crew complement 37, combat capability moderate. Your probability of success acceptable." Ban studied the display. He had no context for the symbols and measurements, no framework for understanding the tactical information presented. But he had spent years as a bandit, had learned to read terrain and identify weakness. The patterns here weren't so different from those he'd studied in fortress layouts and merchant caravans. "Weapons," the Praetorian gestured again. A section of floor irised open, revealing an alcove containing a 3-section staff. Not the one Ban had lost when the forest burned, but close enough that his hands knew its weight before he touched it. The metal was cold, unnatural, but it felt right in his grip. "Necrodermis composite," the Praetorian explained. "Capable of penetrating Drukhari armor. Will not fail under stress. Return it intact." Ban tested the staff's weight, spun it once. The balance was perfect. Almost suspiciously so. He looked at the Praetorian with narrowed eyes. "You planned this before we even arrived." The Necron's optical sensors brightened in what might have been satisfaction. "We have monitored your approach since your craft entered our system 3 days ago. Your capabilities have been assessed. Your psychological profile has been compiled. You are a tool of acceptable parameters. The entity provides motivation for tool compliance." 3 days. Ban's mind caught on that detail. They had been unconscious for 3 days. That meant Elaine had only 40 hours left and 6 days to complete a mission he didn't understand for creatures he didn't trust. What about those gray knights? Irrelevant. They departed system after engaging our perimeter defenses. Their mission parameters did not include extended engagement with Necron forces. You are now lowest priority target for their consideration. Small mercies. Ban shouldered the staff, felt its weight settle into familiar patterns. His body still ached from injuries, not fully healed, but pain was becoming his constant companion. He could work with pain. "When do I leave?" "Immediately." The floor beneath Ban's feet began to glow. He felt a sensation like being pulled in every direction at once, like reality deciding he belonged somewhere else. The chamber blurred, stretched, inverted itself in ways that made his eyes water. Then he stood on a surface of polished bone, under a sky the color of a bruise. The air tasted of chemicals and despair. In the distance, spires rose from a landscape of pure suffering, their architecture designed to inflict psychological damage on anyone who looked at them too long. The Drukhari vessel hung in the air 200 meters ahead, suspended by technology Ban couldn't identify. Its hull was crafted from materials that seemed to shift between solid and liquid states, adorned with blades and hooks that served no functional purpose beyond intimidation. Ban settled into a combat stance and began moving toward his target. The first patrol found him within minutes. 3 figures in armor that seemed grown rather than forged, wielding weapons that crackled with barely contained energy. They moved with predatory grace, their postures suggesting centuries of combat experience. They died in silence. Ban's staff crushed the first one's skull before they registered his presence. The second managed to raise a weapon before the staff's other end caved in their chest. The third actually attacked their blade, carving a line across Ban's ribs that should have disemboweled him. Should have. But Ban's regeneration, though slower than before, was still faster than a normal human's. He ignored the wound, closed the distance, and drove his staff through the Drukhari's throat with enough force that the body pinned to the ground behind it. He moved on without checking the corpses. Time was measured in hours now, and each one that passed brought Elaine closer to fading completely. The vessel's entrance was guarded by heavier forces. Ban counted 12 warriors, all of them alert, all of them armed with weapons that looked designed to inflict maximum agony. He studied their positions for 30 seconds, identified the patrol pattern, found the blind spot. Then he moved. The fight was brutal and efficient. Ban had learned long ago that honor meant nothing if the person you were protecting died while you observed proper etiquette. He attacked from behind, targeting joints and spines, using the staff to cripple before killing. The Drukhari were faster than any human had a right to be. But Ban had fought faster opponents, had learned to read the micro-expressions that preceded strikes to anticipate based on weight distribution and muscle tension. When the last guard fell, Ban stood in a circle of broken bodies and felt absolutely nothing. No satisfaction, no guilt. Just the hollow awareness that this was what survival looked like in a universe that had no mercy to spare. He entered the vessel and began his hunt for the stasis pods. Behind him, the guards' bodies began to dissolve, consumed by some property of the bone ground that wasted nothing. In orbit high above Necron, sensors tracked his progress with mechanical interest. And in a chamber deep beneath the tomb world's surface, Elaine floated in her cage of light and dreamed of forests that no longer existed. The Drukhari vessel's interior was a cathedral of suffering. Ban moved through corridors lined with cages containing things that might have once been human. Their eyes followed him with expressions beyond despair, beyond hope in some territory where sanity went to die. He kept his gaze forward and his grip tight on the staff. Stopping to help them would cost time he didn't have. The stasis pods were in the vessel's heart, arranged in a chamber whose walls wept condensation that smelled of copper and fear. Each pod contained a figure suspended in amber light, their features peaceful in a way that suggested they had no idea what fate awaited them. Ban counted 23 pods exactly as the Praetorian had specified. He was reaching for the first pod when the wall beside him exploded inward. The Drukhari who emerged moved like liquid shadow. Their armor was different from the patrol guards, more ornate, marked with symbols that suggested rank or specialty. In their hands they carried instruments that looked more like surgical tools than weapons, each one gleaming with malicious purpose. Ban's staff came up in time to deflect the first strike. Barely. The blade scored a line across his shoulder that burned with chemical fire, some poison or acid that his regeneration struggled to neutralize. He spun, drove the staff's weighted end into the Drukhari's midsection, felt ribs crack. They laughed. A sound like breaking glass and dying children. The fight that followed lasted 3 minutes and felt like hours. The Drukhari fought with artistic cruelty, each strike designed to maximize pain rather than efficiency. They carved patterns into Ban's flesh, mapped his body with wounds that would have killed a normal human 10 times over. Ban endured, let his regeneration work, waited for openings. When they came, he didn't hesitate. The staff crushed bone and pulped organs with mechanical efficiency. When the Drukhari fell, Ban stood over their body and felt nothing but the weight of passing time. The teleportation field that pulled him back to the tomb world activated 30 seconds later. Ban materialized in the Praetorian's chamber with the stasis pods arranged around him, still intact despite the violence of transit. The Necron examined them with optical sensors that flickered through multiple spectra. Acceptable, it pronounced. Elaine's biostasis has been reinforced. Current projection 6 days, additional stability. Second mission parameters loading. Ban looked past the Praetorian to where Elaine floated. Her form seemed slightly more solid than before the fairy light, marginally brighter. She was still unconscious, still dying, but slower now. The relief that flooded through him was almost physical. Where next? The mission pattern established itself over the following days. The Praetorian would designate a target. Ban would deploy, eliminate resistance retrieve, whatever material or artifact the Necrons required. Each mission bought Elaine more time, reinforced her biostasis, pushed back the moment when her light would finally gutter and die. The second target was a chaos cult operating in the ruins of a hive city. Ban found them in a temple built from melted plasteel, and the bones of their victims, chanting prayers to gods that answered with madness. He killed them methodically, working from the outer guards inward, letting none escape to raise the alarm. When he reached the cult's leader, a thing that had once been human, but now wore tentacles like a cloak, he felt something twist in his chest. They begged, offered him power, immortality, freedom from servitude. Ban crushed their skull with the staff and took the artifact they had been guarding, a crystalline structure that hummed with frequencies that made his teeth ache. The third mission took him to an orc war camp on a moon whose atmosphere was barely breathable. The greenskins came at him in waves, roaring their joy at finding a good fight. Ban obliged them. The staff became an extension of his will, a tool for converting momentum into destruction. He fought for 6 hours straight, his body accumulating damage faster than it could heal, until he stood alone in a field of green corpses and held the war boss's head as proof of completion. The war boss had been massive, easily twice Ban's size, with muscles like corded steel and a laugh that could shatter glass. In the moment before Ban killed him, the orc had grinned with something approaching respect. "You fight good, Yumi. Real good. We's gonna have a proper go someday, yeah?" Ban had driven the staff through the war boss's eye and into his brain. There would be no someday. There was only the mission, only Elaine, only the desperate race against time that consumed his every waking moment. Between deployments, he was allowed brief periods in Elaine's presence. The Praetorian seemed to understand that this contact was necessary to maintain Ban's operational efficiency. He would stand before her containment field and talk to her unconscious form, his voice low and hoarse from exhaustion. "Still here," he would say. "Still fighting. You just keep breathing, understand? Keep that light going, I'm handling everything else." She never responded. But sometimes when he spoke, her fingers would twitch. Small movements that might have been unconscious nerve responses, or might have been something more. Ban chose to believe they were more. On the 5th day, after completing a mission that required him to infiltrate an orbital station and eliminate a rogue tech priest who had been experimenting with banned AI protocols, Ban returned to find the Praetorian accompanied by another Necron. This one was smaller, more delicate in construction. Its chassis marked with symbols that suggested scholarly purpose rather than military function. "The Cryptech wishes to examine the entity," the Praetorian announced. "Cooperation is recommended." Ban's hand tightened on his staff. "No." The Praetorian's optical sensors brightened. "Clarification, this is not a request. The entity's unique properties require comprehensive analysis. Refusal will result in immediate suspension of biostasis maintenance." Every muscle in Ban's body screamed at him to attack, to break these machines apart with his bare hands and damn the consequences. But the rational part of his mind, the part that had kept him alive through years of impossible situations, forced him to step aside. The Cryptech approached Elaine's containment field with movements that seemed almost reverent. Its skeletal hands passed through the light, touched her face. Her arms traced patterns in the air around her form. Sensors extended from its chassis, probing her with energies Ban couldn't identify. After 10 minutes, the cryptech withdrew. It turned to the Praetorian and spoke in a language of clicks and harmonic resonances that Ban's mind translated without his conscious effort. The words carried meaning that bypassed linguistic barriers and imprinted directly onto his consciousness. Fascinating failure. The spiritual matrix is collapsing despite biostasis intervention. Projection total dissolution within 72 hours, regardless of technological support. Recommendation harvest essence before complete degradation. Potential applications in energy weapon research are significant. Something cold settled in Ban's chest. The Praetorian turned to him, its skull-like face unreadable, but somehow conveying satisfaction. The entity's utility as leverage is concluding, it said. However, your performance has been acceptable. Final mission parameters will be provided. Upon completion, you will be granted permission to remain with the entity during its dissolution. This is considered generous compensation. Ban stood very still. His mind processed the Necron's words, turned them over, examined them from every angle. They had never intended to save Elaine. The missions, the biostasis, the false hope, all of it had been manipulation. A way to extract maximum utility from a tool before discarding it. You lied, he said. His voice came out flat, empty of inflection. Negative. Parameters were stated accurately. Biostasis extends survival duration. It does not halt the deterioration's fundamental progression. Your assumption of permanent preservation was your own construction. The cryptech had already lost interest. It moved away to examine other specimens, its sensors probing ancient artifacts with mechanical curiosity. The Praetorian remained watching Ban with optical sensors that held no malice, no satisfaction, nothing but cold calculation. Final mission deploys in 6 hours, it continued. Target Deep Core Research Facility. Objective retrieve experimental time displacement device. Estimated opposition extreme. Your probability of survival 23%. Your probability of mission success adequate. Ban looked past the Praetorian to where Elaine floated. Her light had brightened over the past days, but now he understood that brightness was false. A temporary reinforcement before the final collapse. She had perhaps 3 days left, maybe less. The rage that flooded through him was cold and absolute. Not the hot fury of sudden betrayal, but something colder, more patient. The kind of anger that waited, that calculated, that found the moment when striking would hurt most. I'll do your mission, Ban said. His hands relaxed on the staff, let it hang loose at his side. But I want to see her first, alone, without your sensors watching. The Praetorian tilted its head. Acceptable? Emotional closure increases probability of maximum effort expenditure during final deployment. Privacy will be granted for 30 minutes. Then you deploy. Mouse. The Necrons withdrew, leaving Ban alone in the chamber with Elaine's suspended form. For a long moment, he simply stood there, breathing slowly, forcing his mind to work through the fury that threatened to overwhelm rational thought. Then he stepped close to the containment field and lowered his voice to barely a whisper. Elaine, if you can hear me, don't react. Don't move. Just listen. He waited 10 seconds. Her fingers twitched once. It might have been coincidence. Ban chose to believe otherwise. I'm getting you out of here. I don't care what it takes. I don't care what I have to break. But I need you to hold on just a little longer. Can you do that? Another twitch, smaller this time. That's my girl. Ban stepped back and began to plan. The tomb citadel was vast, a labyrinth of technology and death that stretched for kilometers beneath the world's surface. But he had been deployed from this chamber multiple times. Had seen the corridors, noted the patrol patterns, cataloged the defensive installations. The Necrons thought of him as a tool, simple and predictable. They were about to learn how wrong that assumption was. When the Praetorian returned 30 minutes later, Ban stood ready with the staff shouldered and his expression neutral. If the Necron noticed anything different in his posture or bearing, it gave no indication. "Deploy, roll," the Praetorian commanded. The teleportation field activated. Ban felt reality shift around him, felt himself pulled toward whatever nightmare scenario the Necrons had designated as his final mission. As the Tomb World's chamber faded from view, he took one last look at Elaine's suspended form. He would complete this mission, not because the Necrons demanded it, but because he needed the time it bought. Time to prepare. Time to find the weakness in their perfect mechanical confidence. Time to show them what happened when you threatened the only thing Ban had left to lose. The final mission was a lie. Ban materialized not in some distant research facility, but in a chamber deep within the tomb citadel itself. The teleportation field deposited him in a space so vast, its boundaries disappeared into darkness even his enhanced vision couldn't penetrate. The floor beneath his feet was polished to mirror smoothness, reflecting green light from sources he couldn't identify. He understood immediately. The Necrons had never intended to send him away. This was an execution disguised as deployment. The Praetorian's voice echoed through the chamber from speakers built into the walls themselves. "Final objective clarification. You have been designated as test subject for containment breach scenario. A Titan shard resides in this chamber, imprisoned for 60 million years. Your task is to survive long enough to provide meaningful data on its current combat capabilities." Ban's grip tightened on the staff. "And Elaine. The entity's biostasis will continue for the duration of the experiment. Should you survive beyond projected parameters, renegotiation of terms may occur. Probability assessment of this outcome, 0.03%. The communication cut off, leaving Ban alone in the vast chamber. He settled into a combat stance, staff held ready, and waited. His breathing was steady despite the rage burning in his chest. Anger was useful only if channeled. Wasted on empty gestures, it became a liability. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Ban's breath misted in air that had been merely cold and was now approaching absolute zero. Frost formed on his skin, on his clothes, on the staff's metal surface. He ignored the sensation, focused on the darkness ahead. Light bloomed. Not the green illumination of Necron technology, but something else entirely. Colors that existed outside normal spectrum wavelengths that shouldn't be visible to organic eyes, but somehow were. The light coalesced, took form, became something that Ban's mind struggled to process as a coherent entity. The Titan shard was beautiful in the way that nuclear detonations are beautiful. Pure destructive potential rendered visible energy, given shape and terrible purpose. Its form shifted constantly, never quite settling into one configuration. Sometimes it seemed vaguely humanoid. Sometimes it was pure geometry angles and planes that hurt to look at directly. And always, always, it radiated hunger. When it spoke, its voice came from every direction simultaneously. Mortal. How unexpected. The machines have grown creative in their cruelty. Ban said nothing. He watched the shard circle him, noted the way it moved without actually traversing the space between positions. Teleportation on a micro scale, instant relocation that made predicting its attacks effectively impossible. "You reek of dying magic," the shard continued. Its form solidified briefly into something with a face, or at least a surface that resembled one. Old-world sorcery, primitive and fading. And something else. Something that touched you in the sea of souls. You are contaminated by forces you cannot comprehend. Are you going to talk me to death? The shard's laughter was the sound of stars dying. Then it attacked. The beam of pure energy that lanced from its core should have annihilated Ban instantly. Should have reduced him to component atoms scattered across several dimensions. Instead, he moved. Not fast enough to dodge completely, but fast enough that the beam only caught his left side instead of his center mass. The pain was beyond description. Ban felt his ribs vaporize, felt his lung turn to ash, felt his arm cease to exist in any meaningful way. He hit the ground hard, the staff clattering away across polished stone. His regeneration kicked in immediately, but this wasn't normal damage. The Citan's attack had done something to the space his body occupied, had fundamentally altered the rules governing how matter should behave. His flesh crawled as it tried to rebuild. Bones formed incorrectly twisted at angles that defied biology. Muscle tissue grew in patterns that made no sense. Ban gritted his teeth against the agony and forced his body to comply with something approaching human configuration. It took 30 seconds. That felt like years. The Shard watched with what might have been curiosity. Fascinating. The magic sustaining you is more resilient than expected, but ultimately futile. I am a fragment of a god mortal. I have consumed stars. Your persistence is meaningless. Ban grabbed the staff with his newly reformed hand. The grip felt wrong, the fingers not quite aligned properly, but functional enough. He pushed himself to his feet and faced the Shard with expression empty of everything except cold focus. Then stop talking and finish it. The Shard's form pulsed with something that might have been approval. As you wish. The battle that followed was less a fight than a lesson in futility. The Citan's Shard moved through space like thought moves through consciousness, instantaneous and inevitable. Its attacks came from impossible angles. Beams of energy that curved through dimensions Ban couldn't perceive. Each strike that connected tore away pieces of his body that regenerated slower and more incorrectly each time. Ban endured. He had learned long ago that survival wasn't about winning. It was about refusing to stop. He kept moving, kept attacking when opportunity presented itself, kept existing despite every law of physics suggesting he should not. The staff became an extension of his will. When the Shard materialized close enough, Ban struck at it with everything he had. The necrodermis metal connected with the Shard's form, and for a fraction of a second held. Energy feedback screamed through the staff up. Ban's arms threatened to stop his heart. He held on anyway, pushed harder, felt something in the Shard's coherence waver. Then it threw him. Not physically, but through some manipulation of local gravity that sent him tumbling through the air. Ban hit the chamber wall hard enough to crack. The ancient metal fell 20 meters, hit the ground, and felt his spine shatter in 7 places. His regeneration was failing. Each reconstruction took longer, produced results that deviated further from human baseline. Ban dragged himself upright with arms that no longer bent quite right and faced the Shard with jaw clenched against the white noise of agony that consumed his nervous system. Impressive endurance, the Shard observed. It drifted closer, its form settling into something almost sympathetic. But endurance is not victory. You cannot harm me, mortal. I am beyond your capacity to affect. Ban spat blood. His lungs were still regenerating, producing fluid that tasted of copper and failure. Maybe. But I'm still here. For what purpose your lover dies, regardless of your persistence. The machines care nothing for your sacrifice. This display serves only to prolong suffering. Something in those words hit deeper than any energy beam. Ban thought of Elaine floating in her cage of light, her essence slowly dissolving despite all his efforts. Thought of the missions he had completed, the lives he had taken, the parts of himself he had sacrificed to buy time that turned out to be illusion. The rage that had been cold and calculating suddenly ignited into something else entirely. Ban's vision tunneled. His awareness compressed down to a single point of absolute focus. He had spent years controlling his power rationing, his strength fighting with restraint, because immortality meant he never had to risk everything. But that immortality was gone, now burned away by forces beyond his comprehension. What remained was just a man who had nothing left to lose. He moved, not with tactical precision or calculated efficiency, but with pure, desperate fury. The staff became a blur striking at the shard's form, faster than thought. Each impact sent feedback through his arms that shattered bones. But Ban's regeneration kept pace just enough to let him continue. He didn't dodge the shard's counterattacks, didn't try to defend, just attacked, pushed forward, refused to acknowledge the damage accumulating across his body. The shard actually retreated. Not far, but enough to suggest Ban had become something more than an amusing diversion. Its form flickered, destabilized slightly, as if Ban's assault had found some fundamental frequency in its coherence. "Impossible," the shard said. Its voice carried actual emotion now, surprise. "You cannot affect my matrix. You are merely organic matter." Ban didn't waste breath responding. He pressed the attack, drove the staff into the shard's center mass with strength that tore muscles from bone. The impact created a sound like reality breaking, and for one impossible moment, he felt the staff connect with something solid beneath the shard's energy form. There, a stress point. A flaw in the containment that had held this fragment imprisoned for millions of years. Ban pulled back, repositioned, and struck again. Same spot. Harder this time. His arm shattered from the force, but his left hand grabbed the staff and continued the motion. The shard's form convulsed. Fractures appeared in its coherence lines of darkness, spreading through energy that should have been inviolable. The entity's voice rose in pitch, became a chorus of overlapping screams. "Stop. You don't understand what you're doing." If the containment fails completely, Ban struck again and again and again. Each impact widened the fractures, destabilized the ancient technology, keeping the shard bound. His body was failing now, regeneration unable to keep pace with the feedback damage. Blood ran from his eyes, his ears, every pore. But he kept hitting until the staff broke in his hands, and he was left with just jagged metal and absolute determination. The shard's containment shattered. Energy exploded outward in a wave that should have annihilated everything within a kilometer radius. Ban felt himself lifted, torn apart at the molecular level, scattered across dimensions like dust in wind. Somewhere distant, he heard the Praetorian's voice, calm and analytical, even in catastrophe. "Containment breach confirmed. Initiating emergency protocols. All assets evacuate to minimum safe distance." The chamber filled with light that rewrote the rules of physics. The Citan's shard, no longer bound by ancient chains, expanded to fill the space with its true presence. But freedom came with a cost. The containment's destruction had damaged the shard itself, fractured its already fragmentary nature further. It screamed, not in pain but in rage and loss. Its form began to collapse, to fold in on itself as the energy that composed it bled away into dimensions beyond counting. In its final moments before dissolution, it turned what served as its attention toward Ban's broken body. "You have destroyed us both, mortal. I hope your lover appreciates the futility." Then it was gone. Not killed, not truly, but scattered. Reduced to particles so small they would take millennia to reconstitute even partially. The chamber filled with residual energy, with radiation that would render the space uninhabitable for geological ages. Ban lay in a crater of his own making and tried to remember how to breathe. His body was regenerating, but so slowly that he could track each individual cell reconstructing. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Time had lost cohesion in the aftermath of the shard's destruction. Then he heard it. A sound like glass breaking. A light that was not the green of Necron technology, but softer, warmer, achingly familiar. Ban turned his head, the only part of his body that had regenerated enough to move, and saw Elaine's biostasis chamber materialize at the chamber's edge. The containment field was flickering, destabilized by the energy cascade from the shard's destruction. Through the failing light, Ban could see Elaine's form. She was awake now, her eyes open and fixed on him with expression he couldn't read. The field collapsed entirely. Elaine stumbled forward, fell to her knees, crawled the remaining distance to where Ban lay broken and bleeding. Her hands found his face, and he felt warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. "Ban," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, fractured. "You idiot! You beautiful, stubborn idiot!" He tried to speak, managed only a sound that might have been her name. His lungs were still regenerating, his vocal cords rebuilding from component tissue. Elaine pressed her forehead against his, and Ban felt something shift in her essence. The fairy light that had been dimming for days suddenly flared. Not brighter, but different. More concentrated. Her physical form began to dissolve, to transform into something else entirely. Pure spiritual energy, unbound by flesh, held together only by will and connection to the man, dying in front of her. "Don't leave me," Ban managed. The words came out as barely a whisper. "Never," Elaine said. Her form was almost completely light now, a luminescence that wrapped around him like shelter from the storm. "I'm right here. I'll always be right here." The chamber began to shake. The Citadel's emergency protocols had activated, recognizing catastrophic damage to its primary containment systems. Throughout the tomb world, Necrons mobilized to address the breach. And in the darkest reaches of the complex, other things began to wake. Things that had been sleeping since before humanity learned to make fire. Ban felt Elaine's light seep into his wounds, felt it accelerate his healing just enough that he could move again. With agonizing slowness, he pushed himself to sitting position. Elaine hovered before him, no longer fairy or girl, but something in between. A soul made visible, given form by nothing except refusal to let go. "We need to run," she said. Ban nodded. Looked down at his hands, saw them shaking with exhaustion and pain, looked up at Elaine, at the being she had become. Forced himself to stand despite every nerve screaming protest. Where? Anywhere? Everywhere. Does it matter? It didn't. Ban reached out, and Elaine's light wrapped around his hand like holding sunshine. Together they began moving toward the chamber's exit. Behind them, the space where the Citan shard had been imprisoned continued to collapse, to fold in on itself with violence that would reshape the tomb world's geography. They had escaped one cage, only to find themselves in another. But they were together. And for Ban, that made all the difference. The Citadel was dying around them. Ban and Elaine emerged from the containment chamber into corridors that buckled and twisted as ancient systems failed catastrophically. The Citan's destruction had triggered cascading failures throughout the tomb world's infrastructure, waking defense protocols that had lain dormant for millions of years. Necron warriors poured from alcoves and transport nodes, their movements jerky and confused as conflicting commands overwrote their base programming. Ban moved through them like a ghost. His body had regenerated enough for basic function, though pain remained his constant companion. The staff was gone broken in the final assault on the shard. But his hands were weapons enough. He struck with precision born of desperation, targeting joints and optical sensors, disabling rather than destroying when possible. Every second spent fighting was a second closer to whatever forces were converging on this location. Elaine stayed close, her light form wrapped around his shoulders like a cloak. She had no physical substance anymore, could no longer touch or be touched in conventional ways. But Ban felt her presence with absolute clarity, felt her essence intertwined with his own in ways that went beyond physical proximity. "Left," she whispered. Her voice came from everywhere and nowhere, vibrating through the air itself. 3 immortals ahead. They haven't detected us yet. Ban adjusted his trajectory, slipped into a side passage that led upward through geometry that made his eyes water. The tomb world's architecture had never been designed for organic comprehension. Each corridor bent in ways that suggested more dimensions than the standard 3 each chamber, opened onto perspectives that violated basic spatial logic. They climbed for what felt like hours, but was probably minutes. Time had become unreliable since the shard's destruction moments stretching and compressing randomly. Ban's internal clock, usually precise, kept skipping and stuttering. Then they broke through to the surface and found themselves in the middle of a war. The tomb world sky was on fire. Ships filled the orbital space above dozens of them, each representing a different faction drawn by the catastrophic energy signature of the Cetan's destruction. Ban recognized the Grey Knight's vessels immediately, their silver hulls marked with symbols that hurt to look at. But there were others now. Drukhari raiders hung in the atmosphere like poisoned daggers, their hulls adorned with blades and hooks that served no functional purpose. Orc rocks tumbled through orbit with complete disregard for physics or safety, shedding smaller attack craft like a tree shedding leaves. And rising from the tomb world itself, great Necron tomb ships phased into reality, their weapons coming online with light that promised annihilation. The first orbital strike hit 300 meters from their position. The impact was a miniature sun vaporizing stone and metal in an instant. The shockwave threw Ban backward, and only Elaine's light wrapping around him kept his recently healed body from disintegrating. "They're all coming," Elaine said. Her voice carried fear for the first time since her transformation. "They all want what we found. The Cetan residue. Me." Ban understood immediately. To the Grey Knights, Elaine was a warp anomaly that needed purging. To the Necrons, she was contaminated research material that needed containment. To the Drukhari, she represented a pure soul ripe for harvesting. And to the Orcs, the massive battle brewing was its own justification. 4 armies each with its own reason to see Ban and Elaine dead or captured. "Then we run faster," Ban said. The next strike came from a different vector. Gauss weaponry from Necron tomb ships' green beams that disassembled matter at the molecular level. The beams carved canyons through the tomb world's surface, turning solid metal to dust in microseconds. Ban ran perpendicular to the strikes, using cover that vaporized moments after he left it. Then the first infantry forces landed. Grey Knights teleported directly into the combat zone, their arrival heralded by reality tearing like wet paper. Ban recognized Justicar Dragor's armor, immediately the distinctive scarring from their previous encounter still visible on the ceramite plates. The Space Marine's optics locked onto Elaine's light form with targeting precision. "The anomaly has metastasized," Dragor announced. His voice carried across the battlefield through Vox amplification. Immediate termination authorized. Storm bolters opened fire. Blessed rounds carved through the air with trajectories calculated by machine spirits devoted to killing things that shouldn't exist. Ban threw himself into a roll, felt the rounds pass close enough to singe his hair. One caught his leg, exploded inside the calf muscle, sent him tumbling. He came up running anyway. Pain was information now, data to be acknowledged and filed away. His leg healed as he moved bones, knitting and muscle reforming around shrapnel that his body slowly pushed out through closing wounds. Drukhari descended on jet bikes that screamed through the air like dying things. Their riders wore armor that seemed grown rather than forged, organic and angular in ways that suggested intentional psychological warfare. They carried weapons designed to inflict maximum agony, blades coated with neurotoxins and nets woven from still living wire. One rider swept past Ban close enough to strike. Their blade carved a line across his chest that burned with chemical fire. Ban's hand shot out faster than thought and grabbed the rider's ankle. He pulled hard, used their momentum against them, sent the Drukhari tumbling from their mount to smash against stone with terminal velocity. The jet bike spun out of control and crashed into an advancing Necron phalanx. The explosion took out 3 warriors, whose bodies immediately began self-repair protocols. Orcs arrived with the subtlety of a collapsing building. They came in a green tide, roaring their joy at finding such a magnificent battle. War buggies bounced across broken terrain, their drivers laughing as they fired wildly in every direction. Orc boys charged on foot, their weapons chattering with enthusiasm that made up for what they lacked in accuracy. And leading them, massive, even among his own kind, was a war boss that Ban recognized. Gorzug Skullkrumpa, the same orc whose war camp Ban had attacked on the moon. The same one whose warriors Ban had slaughtered to complete the Necron's mission. The war boss saw Ban, and his grin widened until it seemed to split his face in half. "You!" Gorzug bellowed. His voice carried across the battlefield like thunder. "You to Yumi, what crumped me boys been looking for you. We's gonna have that proper go now, yeah." The war boss charged. Not at the Grey Knights, or Necrons, or Drukhari, but directly at Ban. His massive frame bulldozed through combatants from every faction, swatting aside warriors like insects. In his hands, he carried a weapon that defied description. Part axe, part chainsaw, part artillery piece, entirely covered in orc glyphs that proclaimed its devastating potential. Ban had no weapon, no armor, nothing but his body and the light that was Elaine wrapped around him. He set his feet anyway, fell into a combat stance learned through years of fighting opponents who should have killed him. "Ban, run," Elaine pleaded. "You can't fight all of them." "Don't have to fight all of them," Ban replied. "Just need to get through them." Gorzug's weapon came down in an arc that would have bisected a tank. Ban slid under it, came up inside the war boss's guard, drove his fist into the orc's midsection with enough force to crack ribs. Gorzug laughed, brought his head down in a headbutt that connected with Ban's skull and sent him reeling. Stars exploded across Ban's vision. He spat blood, felt his nose regenerate from powder back into cartilage and bone. Gorzug was already swinging again, and Ban couldn't dodge in time. Elaine's light flared. She wrapped herself around Ban's body, and suddenly he could see the weapon's trajectory with perfect clarity. Could see the micro-adjustments in Gorzug's stance, could predict where the blow would land with mathematical precision. Ban moved with confidence that came from something beyond his own senses, twisted just enough that the weapon missed by centimeters. His counterattack took Gorzug in the throat. Not hard enough to kill, not even close, but enough to make the war boss stumble. Ban didn't press the advantage. He ran, using the moment of surprise to create distance. Behind them, the 4 armies crashed together in earnest. Grey Knights carved through Necron formations with blessed blades that disrupted resurrection protocols. Drukhari raiders swooped through the chaos, harvesting souls from the dying with weapons that captured essence in crystalline matrices. Orcs fought everyone with equal enthusiasm, their battle cries rising above the thunder of weapons fire. And through it all, the Necrons advanced with mechanical inevitability. They died in droves, but each fallen warrior simply phased back to underground reconstruction facilities to be rebuilt and redeployed. Their Gauss weaponry carved through power armor and organic flesh with equal efficiency, reducing targets to their component atoms. Ban ran through the center of the maelstrom, with Elaine's light guiding his steps. She showed him the gaps in fire patterns, the moments when attention shifted elsewhere, the paths through the chaos that offered highest survival probability. They moved like water through cracks in stone, always flowing toward the lowest point of resistance. A storm bolter burst caught Ban in the back. 3 rounds exploded against his spine, and he felt vertebrae shatter. His legs stopped working momentum, sending him tumbling across shattered ground. He rolled, came up on his hands, dragged himself forward with arm strength alone, while his lower body regenerated. Drukhari descended like vultures, 5 of them moving with coordination that suggested decades fighting together. Their nets spread wide, woven from wire that sparked with energy designed to capture souls. They closed on Elaine's light form from multiple vectors simultaneously. Ban forced his legs to work, pushed himself upright through sheer will. His hand closed around a piece of debris, some fragment of Necron architecture. He threw it with all his strength, caught one Drukhari in the face mask. The warrior stumbled and Ban was already moving. He hit the first one low, driving his shoulder into their midsection hard enough to crack armor. Spun caught the second one's wrist, broke it with a twist that sent their weapon clattering away. The third got a blade through Ban's ribs, but he ignored the wound, grabbed their head, and slammed it into his rising knee. The fourth and fifth attacked together. Ban took hits he couldn't block. Let pain be the price of protecting Elaine. One blade opened his throat. Another carved through his hamstring. He pulled the attackers down with him, fought them on the ground with teeth and broken fingers and absolute refusal to let them pass. When he finally stood again, his body was a map of wounds in various stages of healing. The Drukhari lay scattered around him, their armor cracked and their bodies still. Ban swayed, caught himself, looked for Elaine. She was above him, her light pulsing with distress. "Ban, please, you can't keep this up." "Watch me," he said. Blood made his voice wet and thick. The sky overhead split open. Not metaphorically, but literally, reality tearing along seams Ban hadn't known existed. Through the gap came something that made every combatant pause, that drew attention from every faction simultaneously. A Drukhari gate. Not a small portal for raiders, but a massive rupture into the webway itself. The technology required to create such a breach was supposed to be beyond even the Dark Eldar. Yet here it stood, pulsing with energies that made Ban's skin crawl. Through the gate poured reinforcements. Drukhari in numbers that turned the tide of battle, their vehicles screaming as they emerged into real space. But the gate was unstable, its edges flickering and sparking with uncontrolled discharge. Ban understood opportunity when he saw it. "Elaine, that gate. Can you feel what's beyond it?" Her light pulsed with concentration. The webway. Ancient passages between real space and the warp. "Ban, it's dangerous. The paths aren't stable. We could be lost forever, as opposed to being lost right here, right now." She had no answer for that. Ban began moving toward the gate, using the chaos of renewed combat as cover. Every faction had recognized the webway breach as either opportunity or threat. The Grey Knights advanced to seal it. The Necrons moved to claim the technology. The Orcs attacked because attacking was what Orcs did, and the Drukhari fought to keep their escape route open. Ban walked through the battle like a man already dead. He took wounds he couldn't avoid, endured pain that should have rendered him unconscious, kept moving because stopping meant dying, and dying meant Elaine would be alone. Warriors from every faction tried to stop him. He went through them, or around them, or occasionally over them, his body accumulating damage faster than it could heal. Gorzug appeared again, materializing from the smoke and fire like a recurring nightmare. The war boss's armor was scorched and dented, but his grin remained undiminished. "You keep running," Gorzug roared with something approaching respect. "That's good. Makes the hunt more fun." His weapon came around in a horizontal sweep that Ban couldn't dodge. The blade caught him across the chest, bit deep, sent him spinning through the air. Ban hit the ground hard, bounced, came to rest 10 meters from the webway gate. Gorzug advanced for the killing blow. His weapon rose poised to end Ban's existence in one final strike. Ban looked up at the war boss through vision blurred with blood and pain. "Good fight," Gorzug said, almost gentle. "You fought real good, Yumi. Time to rest now, yeah?" The weapon descended. Ban closed his eyes. Elaine's light exploded outward. The blast of pure spiritual energy caught Gorzug full in the chest and threw him backward like a child's toy. The war boss crashed through his own lines, scattering orc boys like bowling pins. He didn't get back up immediately. "Ban!" Elaine's voice was raw with desperation. "Move now." Ban moved. He dragged himself upright through effort that should have been impossible, his body held together by nothing but will and Elaine's light. The webway gate was 3 meters away, then 2, then 1. Behind them, every faction recognized what was happening. Storm bolters tracked his movement. Gauss weaponry charged. Drukhari weapons hummed with readiness. They all fired simultaneously, a convergence of death from 4 different sources. Ban threw himself forward into the gate's shimmering surface. Elaine's light wrapped around him completely, shielding him from the worst of the impacts. Energy washed over them in waves that should have annihilated both. The webway pulled them in, and reality inverted itself. The tomb world disappeared, replaced by impossible corridors that existed between spaces by paths that led everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. They had escaped the battle. But what they had escaped into was infinitely worse. The webway was alive, not in any biological sense, but in the way ancient structures become haunted by the passage of millennia. Ban felt it the moment they crossed the threshold. Felt intelligence that was not consciousness, observing their intrusion with something between curiosity and hostility. The corridors stretched in directions that had no names, folding space like origami crafted by gods. Elaine's light pulsed with distress. "Ban! This place, it's wrong. Not warp wrong, but fundamentally incompatible with organic existence." Ban tried to respond and discovered he couldn't breathe. The webway had no atmosphere in any conventional sense. What filled the corridors was something else entirely, a medium that carried sound and light, but provided nothing for lungs to process. His body immediately began suffocating cells screaming for oxygen that didn't exist. His regeneration compensated. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. His cells learned to extract energy directly from the webway's ambient radiation to convert exotic particles into something approaching metabolic fuel. It was inefficient, agonizing, and unsustainable, but it kept him alive. For now, they moved deeper into the labyrinth. The corridors pulsed with colors that existed outside visible spectrum, with geometries that made Ban's eyes water when he looked directly at them. Sometimes the passages were narrow enough that he had to turn sideways to pass. Sometimes they opened into voids so vast that sound disappeared entirely, swallowed by distances that shouldn't fit inside any physical structure. Behind them, something gave chase. Ban heard it first as a vibration through the webway's walls. A disturbance in the medium, a pressure wave that suggested massive displacement. He looked back and saw nothing, but the absence was worse than any visible threat. "They're coming," Elaine whispered. Her light had dimmed since entering the webway, her essence struggling against the realm's fundamental hostility. The Drukhari. They know these paths. They built their civilization on stolen webway access. Ban ran. His body protested every movement, wounds that had barely begun healing tearing open again under stress. The webway's floor was smooth, but somehow wrong, each step sending feedback through his legs that suggested the surface wasn't entirely solid. Or was too solid. Or existed in states that oscillated between the two faster than perception could track. The first attack came without warning. A blade erupted from the webway's wall itself, passing through supposedly solid material like it was fog. The edge caught Ban's shoulder, carved through muscle and scraped bone. He twisted away, but more blades followed. Dozens of them emerging from every surface simultaneously. Drukhari trap. They had seeded the webway paths with weapons designed to trigger when prey passed, turning the corridors themselves into killing boxes. Ban threw himself forward, accepting cuts he couldn't avoid, prioritizing speed over defense. Blood traced his passage droplets that hung in the webway's strange atmosphere like suspended jewels. Elaine's light flared, and suddenly Ban could see the trap's pattern. could perceive the timing of each blade's emergence, the gaps in their coverage. He moved with precision that exceeded his training, guided by Elaine's enhanced perception. They passed through the gauntlet with wounds that would have killed a normal human 10 times over. The corridor ahead split into 3 branches, then 5, then dozens. The webway fractured like a crystal, each path leading to destinations that Ban's mind couldn't properly process. Some corridors led to places that were too bright. Others to locations where darkness had physical weight. One passage seemed to fold back on itself in ways that violated causality. Which way? Ban's voice came out as a rasp. His throat had barely regenerated from the Drukhari blade, earlier tissue still raw and incomplete. Elaine hesitated. In that moment of uncertainty, Ban felt her fear with absolute clarity. She was guiding them through a maze she didn't understand, making decisions based on instinct that might lead them anywhere or nowhere. Left, she said finally. It feels less hostile. They took the left path and immediately knew it was wrong. The corridor constricted around them walls, pressing inward with force that suggested intentional malice. Ban pushed against the surfaces, felt them yield slightly before pressing harder. His bones creaked under the pressure. Back, Elaine said. Unnecessary. Ban was already moving, forcing his way against the compression. The corridor released them with sudden violence, ejecting them back into the junction chamber, hard enough that Ban's recently healed ribs cracked again. The Drukhari arrived as Ban was pulling himself upright. There were 3 of them moving through the webway with the confidence of beings who had spent centuries mastering its paths. Their armor was different from the raiders on the tomb world, more ornate, marked with symbols that suggested specialized roles. One carried instruments that looked more like musical instruments than weapons. Another wore armor covered in hooks from which hung small crystalline vials, each one glowing with captured soul light. The third simply watched their helms styled to resemble a flayed face. Fleeing prey, the watcher said. Their voice carried musical tones that made Ban's teeth ache. How delightful, and wounded so beautifully. The soul light entity you carry will make an exquisite addition to our collection. Ban said nothing. His body settled into combat stance automatically. Weight distributed for maximum mobility despite injuries that made every movement agony. He had no weapon, no armor, nothing but flesh that refused to stop functioning, and rage that burned colder than the webway's ambient temperature. The Drukhari with the instruments attacked first. Their device produced sound that wasn't sound frequencies, that bypassed ears entirely and struck directly at the nervous system. Ban felt his muscles seize, his coordination shatter. He fell to one knee, fought to remain conscious as his brain tried to shut down. Elaine's light pulsed and the sound died. Not silenced, but consumed, absorbed into her essence and converted to something harmless. The Drukhari's expression visible through their helms shifted to something approaching surprise. Ban moved while they were distracted. His fist connected with the musician's helm, hard enough to crack the ornate faceplate. They stumbled back, and Ban pressed the advantage. His second strike crushed their throat. The third caved in the side of their skull. The Drukhari, with the soul vials, was already moving their hands, weaving patterns in the air that left trails of captured anguish. The essences in their vials began to manifest, taking form as phantom figures that reached for Ban with grasping hands. He felt their touch as cold that went beyond temperature, as despair that threatened to drag him down into depths from which no will could surface. He pushed through anyway. Grabbed the Drukhari by their armor, pulled them close, drove his forehead into their face with force that shattered his own orbital bone. The Drukhari's vials broke, releasing the captured souls in a cascade of light that screamed with voices from 1,000 agonies. The Watcher moved then. Not with the speed of their companions, but with something worse. Precision. Their blade took Ban in the gut, angled upward to pierce vital organs. The edge was impossibly thin, impossibly sharp, and coated with toxins that made Ban's regeneration falter for the first time since entering the webway. "Adequate tracing," the Watcher said. They twisted the blade. Ban felt his liver rupture, his stomach open. But ultimately futile. You cannot protect the soul light. It belongs to us by right of superior craft. Ban's hand closed around the blade. The edge cut through his palm, severed tendons, and scraped bone. He didn't let go. Instead, he pulled, dragging himself closer despite the weapon buried in his abdomen. The Watcher tried to withdraw. Ban's other hand shot out, grabbed their helm, held them in place. They were close enough now that Ban could see his reflection in their armor. Saw himself covered in blood, his body a collection of wounds held together by nothing but stubbornness. "She's not yours," Ban said. Each word cost him. "Not theirs, not anyone's, just mine." He pulled the Watcher's head down as he brought his own up. The headbutt connected with enough force that Ban felt his skull fracture. The Watcher's helm cracked. They stumbled back, and Ban yanked the blade from his gut, reversed it, drove it through their chest with both hands. The Drukhari fell. Ban stood over their body for 3 seconds before his legs gave out. He collapsed beside them, his body finally reaching limits even his supernatural endurance couldn't exceed. Blood pooled beneath him, spreading across the webway's impossible floor. Elaine's light wrapped around him completely. No. Ban, stay with me, please." His regeneration was working, but so slowly that he could track each individual cell. The toxin from the blade was fighting his healing factor, corrupting the process, turning regeneration into something malformed and wrong. New tissue grew with tumor-like irregularity. Bones set at wrong angles. His body was trying to kill itself and heal simultaneously. "Elaine." His voice was barely a whisper. "Keep going. Find a way out. Not without you. Then help me up." She couldn't touch him, not physically. But her light sank into his wounds, and Ban felt warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. Felt strength that wasn't his own, flowing through exhausted muscles. It wasn't enough to heal him, not really. But it was enough to let him move. Ban pushed himself upright. Each movement sent fresh waves of agony through his nervous system. His body was shutting down, systems failing one by one, as toxin and exhaustion overwhelmed even supernatural resilience. But Elaine's presence kept his mind clear, kept his consciousness from the darkness that beckoned. They moved forward through corridors that became increasingly unstable. The webway was rejecting them, recognizing their presence as incompatible with its ancient design. Walls rippled like water. Floors became transparent, revealing voids that contained things Ban's mind refused to process. The boundary between real space and the warp grew thin, and Ban could feel the Imperium pressing against reality, like a beast testing cage bars. Then ahead, Ban saw something different. Not a corridor or junction, but a tear. A wound in the webway itself, a place where the ancient structure had failed completely. Through the gap, Ban caught glimpses of something that might have been real space. Darkness. Void. The absence of everything. "There," Elaine said. Her voice carried hope and terror in equal measure. "That's our way out." Ban looked at the tear and understood with perfect clarity what passing through it would cost. The energies bleeding from that rupture were unlike anything they had faced. Not warp corruption or webway hostility, but pure destructive potential. Whatever existed beyond that, tear would kill him. Not quickly, but absolutely. His regeneration wouldn't save him. Elaine's light wouldn't protect him, but they would be free. Ban began walking toward the tear. Each step was an exercise in defying biology. His body screamed its protests, demanded that he stop, lie down, let unconsciousness claim him. He ignored every signal, every instinct, every reasonable impulse. Elaine's light pulsed with realization. Ban, if we go through there, you won't survive. Probably not. Then we find another way. There is no other way. He reached the tear's edge. The energies radiating from it made his skin smoke, made his blood boil in his veins. This close, Ban could feel the absolute wrongness of the space beyond. It wasn't void. It was the negation of existence itself, a place where matter couldn't sustain cohesion. Ban looked back at the webway corridors behind them. Saw shadows moving in the distance, more Drukhari coming to claim their prize. Heard the vibrations of pursuit growing closer. They had minutes at most before being overtaken. He looked forward at the tear and the darkness beyond. I told you once, Ban said. His voice was calm despite everything. I'd make you mine, whatever it took. This is what it takes. Before Elaine could protest, before doubt could take hold, Ban stepped through the tiar. The webway tore him apart. Not all at once, but methodically, systematically, with the patience of entropy itself. His skin flayed away in strips. His muscles unraveled like poorly knit fabric. Bones dissolved into component minerals. He felt every moment of his destruction with absolute clarity, experienced his own disintegration in excruciating detail. But Elaine stayed with him. Her light wrapped around what remained of his essence, shielded the core of who he was, even as his body ceased to exist. Together they fell through darkness that had no end, through void that predated stars. And somewhere in that endless dark Ban held on to the one thing that mattered. The light that was Elaine, warm and constant, against the cold of infinite night. Ban woke to silence so complete it had texture. He lay on something that might have been ground, might have been nothing at all. His body existed again, though calling it a body felt inaccurate. It was more like a memory of flesh, a conceptual framework his consciousness insisted on maintaining, because the alternative was incomprehensible. He could see his hands, could feel them move, but when he looked closely, the details became uncertain. Were those fingers, or just the idea of fingers? He sat up slowly. Pain was absent for the first time since the fountain's destruction, but the absence felt wrong. Pain had become his constant companion, the proof that he still existed in material terms. Without it, he felt untethered, drifting in ways that had nothing to do with physical location. Elaine floated beside him. Her light had changed, become less pure soul and more something else. Something that existed in the space between concepts neither alive nor dead, neither material nor immaterial. She pulsed with rhythms that Ban felt more than saw. Where are we? His voice came out steady despite everything. Nowhere, Elaine said. Her voice carried harmonics that suggested she was speaking multiple languages, simultaneously, none of them quite matching the words Ban heard. Everywhere. The edge of what is and what isn't. This is where reality ends and nothing begins. Ban looked around. The space they occupied had no features, no landmarks, nothing to suggest dimension or scale. Sometimes it seemed vast beyond comprehension. Sometimes it felt claustrophobic, pressing in from all sides. The only constant was darkness, not the absence of light, but something deeper. The darkness that existed before the first star ignited that would remain after the last sun died. Are we dead? Elaine's light dimmed briefly. I don't know. You should be. Your body was destroyed completely. The webway's collapse should have scattered your essence across dimensions. But you're here. We're here. Ban examined his hands again. They looked real, felt real. But when he tried to remember the sensation of the webway tearing them apart, the memory was distant. Not forgotten, but experienced by someone else. Something else. A version of himself that had ceased to exist somewhere in the transition. The others, he said. The Grey Knights, the Necrons, the Drukhari. Will they find us here? No. Elaine's certainty was absolute. This place is beyond their reach, beyond anyone's reach. There are no webway paths here, no warp currents, no real space coordinates. We've fallen through every map, every chart, every method of navigation. We're lost. Ban nodded slowly. Lost. The word should have carried weight, should have triggered fear or despair. Instead, he felt something approaching peace. They had run so far, fought so hard, endured so much. And now there was nowhere left to run. No more battles. No more desperate escapes. Just this quiet darkness and Elaine's light. I'm sorry, he said. The words came out softer than intended. Elaine's light pulsed with confusion. For what? For not saving you. For dragging you through all that. For ending up here instead of somewhere safe. The light wrapped around him warmer than anything physical. Ban, you're an idiot. He almost smiled. Yeah, you did save me. Every time. Every single time something tried to take me, you stopped it. When the warp wanted to consume me, you fought daemons. When the Necrons tried to harvest me, you destroyed a god fragment. When the Drukhari came for my soul, you killed them despite being poisoned. And when there was no other choice, you walked through annihilation to keep me free. Lot of good it did. We're stuck in nowhere forever. We're together, Elaine said. Her voice carried weight that had nothing to do with volume. After everything, after all of it, we're still together. Do you understand what that means, what you've done? Ban thought about the question seriously. Thought about the fountain of youth and the forest burning. Thought about 700 years of loneliness that Elaine had endured before he stumbled into her life with nothing but stubbornness and a desire for something good to finally happen. Thought about promises made and kept despite every cosmic force trying to break them. It means I kept my word, he said finally. Elaine's light brightened until the darkness around them retreated slightly. It means you changed everything. Do you know what you are now? What we are? Lost. A myth, Elaine said. A legend. Something that will be told in whispers across that terrible universe we left behind. The man who fought Grey Knights and survived. Who destroyed a Titan's shard through impossible fury. Who walked through the webway's collapse and emerged into nowhere still carrying the light he protected. The King of Nothing. The title settled over Ban like a cloak. He turned it over in his mind, examined it from every angle. The King of Nothing. A ruler of empty space, a monarch of darkness, a sovereign over the void between realities. Sounds pretentious, he said. Elaine laughed. The sound was wind through dead forests, water over ancient stones, the first breath after drowning. It filled the darkness with something that might have been joy. It's perfect, she said. You own nothing, rule nothing, possess nothing except what you refuse to let go of. That's more kingdom than most monarchs ever achieve. Ban lay back down on the uncertain ground. Above him, or what his mind insisted was, above the darkness, remained absolute. No stars, no light except Elaine's gentle glow. He wondered if this was what death felt like. Not ending, but transition into something without definition. Will we be here forever? He asked. I don't know. Time doesn't work right in this place. Forever might be a moment. A moment might be eternity. Does it matter? Ban considered the question. In his old lifetime had been measured by the next fight, the next score, the next moment of surviving against odds. Even after gaining immortality, he had measured existence in heartbeats and breaths. But here in this place beyond measure, such calculations felt meaningless. No, he said, I guess it doesn't. They existed in silence for what might have been hours or centuries. Bond found himself thinking about the universe they had left behind. Wondered if the tomb world still burned. If the Grey Knights had claimed the Citan residue. If Gorzug still looked for the fight they never finished. The thoughts came without urgency observations rather than concerns. "Do you regret it?" Elaine asked eventually. "Any of it?" Ban thought about the question with the seriousness it deserved. Thought about pain and death and fear. Thought about losing his immortality piece by piece. About watching Elaine fade despite every effort to save her. Thought about the countless beings he had killed, the civilizations and assassins he had passed through, the chaos he had left in his wake. "No," he said. "I'd do it all again. Exactly the same. Even this being trapped in nowhere forever. Especially this." Ban turned his head to look at her light. "I told you once in that forest, when everything was burning. I said I'd make you mine. You remember what you said back?" Elaine's glow softened. "You never got to finish the sentence. I died before you could." "Yeah. So let me finish it now." Ban pushed himself up to sitting, faced her directly. "I said I'd make you mine. Not possession, not ownership. Just mine to protect. Mine to stand beside. Mine to refuse to abandon no matter what comes. And you're mine, Elaine. Forever. In nowhere, in anywhere, in whatever this is." The light pulsed with emotion. Ban couldn't name. "And you're mine," Elaine whispered. "My beautiful, stubborn, impossible idiot. Forever." They stayed like that, facing each other, in the darkness beyond darkness. Bond felt something shift, something fundamental about his existence change. He was no longer the bandit who stole the fountain's water. No longer the immortal who refused to die. No longer even entirely human in any conventional sense. He was something new, something undefined. The king of nothing, ruler of empty space. The man who fought the universe to a draw and walked away with the only thing that mattered. Somewhere in the universe, they had left behind stories would begin. Tales told in whispers by those who had witnessed their passage. The Necrons would record the anomaly that destroyed a Citan shard and vanished into the webway. The Grey Knights would note the warp-touched entity that resisted purging through impossible circumstances. The Drukhari would speak of prey that chose annihilation over capture. The Orcs would remember the tiny human who fought like something 3 times his size. And across the darkness, between stars and the spaces where light feared to travel, a new legend would take root. The king of nothing and his eternal light. The man who owned nothing but loss and turned it into victory anyway. The warrior who fought until there was nowhere left to fight, then kept fighting regardless. Ban didn't know any of this. Didn't care about legends or myths or stories. He only knew that Elaine's light was warm, that the darkness was patient, and that for the first time since the forest burned, he felt something approaching peace. "What do we do now?" he asked. Elaine's light brightened with what might have been a smile. "We exist. We persist. We refuse to fade. Same thing we've always done. That's not much of a plan. It's kept us alive this long." Ban almost laughed. She was right. They had survived not through strategy or power or even luck, just through stubborn refusal to accept endings. Through loyalty that transcended reason. Through love too obstinate to be killed by gods or monsters or the universe itself. "All right," he said. "Then we keep going." "Where? Does it matter?" Elaine's light wrapped around him completely. "No, I suppose it doesn't." They rose together, 2 beings at the edge of everything, and began walking through darkness that had no direction. Ban didn't know where they were going. Didn't know if going anywhere was even possible in this place. But Elaine was beside him, her light steady in the infinite night, and that was enough. Behind them, if behind had any meaning, the void watched their departure with something approaching respect. They were the first beings in cosmic memory to choose this fate willingly, to walk into nothing and emerge still whole. Their passage would leave marks on reality itself, subtle disturbances that would echo through millennia. But Ban and Elaine knew none of this. They simply walked two souls bound together through darkness that went on forever. The King of Nothing and his eternal light lost and found simultaneously, neither alive nor dead, but something beyond both. And if the darkness sometimes seemed less absolute where they passed, if light occasionally flickered in spaces where no light should exist, if beings at the edge of reality sometimes glimpsed two figures walking hand in hand through the void well, legends had to start somewhere. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there was only war, two souls had found something else. Not peace, not victory, not any destination that could be named or mapped. Just each other. And in the end, that was the only kingdom worth having.